What's up, guys? Okay, so today my whole goal of this whole entire review is to convince you to spend $550. And I'll totally get into all the reasons why. This is my second time doing the review. I know it's going to be a long one because the last one that I made for this was 40 minutes long and I was like, maybe a little bit too long. Might want to redo it, so that's what I'm doing now. First, let's go ahead and get into the build of the DT1770 Pro. It's metal everywhere. It's metal on the headband, on the cup, around the cup. The cushions are soft and pliable. This little bit here that holds on the metal band is plastic, but it feels solid. The weight is pretty substantial, but especially with the leatherette pads, it's very even across the top and around your ears. And it feels quality, it feels heavy, but it's not overbearingly so, something that I really like. It does have a one-sided mini XLR input, and it comes with two cables. One is going to be the standard traditional coiled Beyerdynamic cable, and it looks like this. And then the other one is going to be a longer straight cable. And I do have a link to a shorter locking mini XLR cable down in the link description below. It's about 3.5 feet. I highly recommend that one. It does come with a carrying case, and I really like the carrying case. It's not super hard, it's not soft either, but it has the headphones fit perfectly in there. It is a little bit on the larger side, but it's not a horrible thing in my opinion. The next thing I want to talk about is the power requirement for this sucker, because it is a 250 ohm headphone at 102 decibels. I'm not going to say run them off a phone. Don't do that, or even off your computer. I do recommend an amp, even if it's a cheap one. The SMSL SAP6 was able to run it. It's 50 bucks, guys. If you're already spending the money, you might as well get at least that. I was also able to power it off of a Fola 2, a Shit Stack, a Oppo Ha2, and very easily off of a Little Dot 3 tube amplifier. Now, there are three amps that I was not able to power it off of. The Audio Engine D1 and the Audio Engine D3, and the SMSL 8018. That couldn't power it either. It is on my recommendations list, but it's not the strongest headphone amplifier. Okay, I want to talk about these in two different capacities. One is completely for the consumer, not the professional, nobody who's making videos, nobody who's making music, nobody who's mixing vocals. The first thing I want to talk about is that for both the professional and the consumer use, these are very aggressive headphones. Extremely aggressive. They're fast. I consider them to be very detailed. I know there's a reviewer out there who says that the low end is not very detailed. I disagree personally. I think the low end is very detailed. The highs are bright and sparkly. They can be a little bit bright. They're not sibilant in the way that sibilance tends to lose detail, at least in my experience. But they can be very bright, especially if like trumpet or cymbals were not mastered correctly. It's gonna be pretty bright. There is a little bit of dip in the upper mid range and then a kind of a jump into the high range, and I think that kind of falsifies brightness in a sort of way. But honestly, I care more about the end result of listening to something than the technicalities of how it got there. So if it sounds bright, it sounds bright. The soundstage, it's a closed headphone. It's not gonna be super wide. It's very tight. Imaging is fantastic. The instrumental separation is very good, although it's not great with forward and back. But being able to follow along, let's call it the line of an instrument, it's incredibly good. I was listening to the introduction song for The Force Awakens, and I had no idea, but there's harp in there. And the funny thing is, I wasn't even critically listening to the song. I was just putting these, just listening to music, just doing my normal stuff. And then I was like, is that a harp? Like, what the hell? And the funny thing was, like, it wasn't just like in the background. It was in the background, but it wasn't like, I was just like, huh, that's a harp. It wasn't like that. I could hear the tension of the strings. I could hear the plucking of her finger. I could hear everything. And it's way on the right side when this entire orchestra is blasting at you. For those little micro details, it was just insane. Now, overall texture, I would consider it to be a little bit sharp, not very smooth, kind of like the difference between like a solid state and a tube amp. There's just a little bit of smoothness that comes with the tube, a little bit more sharpness that comes with the solid state. Now, like I mentioned before about the low end on this, as you can see by this frequency response graph, which I don't normally post because I don't really care a whole lot about them, but I know a lot of people do, especially when I get to the professional side. The low end is definitely a huge part of the sound signature to this thing. It hits hard and it hits with authority. I think it's detailed. I personally consider it extremely detailed, probably the most detailed sub bass that I have ever heard out of a headphone or a subwoofer. And the thing that I really like about it is the fact that even though it's detailed, even though it's incredibly present, it doesn't show up where there's not a lot of bass. There's a cover of Besame Mucho by, I think it's Andrea Bocelli, if I'm not mistaken. I'll put a name on the screen. And there's a bass guitar kind of in the background, mostly on the left side. You know, you can tell that it's not being played very hard. And I've noticed on systems with overactive bass that guitar hits way too hard, and it's not supposed to be like that. And that's one of the songs that I test for bass response, or really the lack thereof, because it should be textured, it should be detailed, but it shouldn't be forward. And this presented it the best I have ever heard on any headphone. But if you go lower and lower and lower into the ranges, a lot of headphones fall apart after 60 hertz. They may play 30 hertz, but they don't really play 30 hertz well. This thing doesn't give a shit. It's like, you want to throw a 30 hertz at me? I don't care. Throw it at me. You want to see detail at 30 hertz? I'll show you detail at 30 hertz. It doesn't give a shit. So real quick, I want to cover just a few of the hundreds of songs that I tested on this. I've had this for a full month. Unfortunately, I do have to give it back in 2 days, back to Beyerdynamic. I'll get into that disclaimer at the end of the video. But I want to go over a few songs. So Lion by Kodo has a lot of different styles of drums, and it's got this really bassy drum, and you can just hear the way that the hand is interacting with the drum, the thump, and the resonance within that chamber of the drum. It's some of the most impressive bass response I have ever heard, period. That Besame Mucho song also, it's a test for male vocals and resonance and the way that background instruments are displayed. It has very good recording quality. Live version of Rocket Man by Elton John, testing Elton John's amazing male vocals and all the perfections and the flaws of him and the piano in the crowd. A 99 Left Balloons cover by Kaleida. They're relatively unknown. I highly, highly recommend them. That tests electronic music for both high ranges and low ranges, as well as female vocals. And then the Prague Cello Quartet cover of Bohemian Rhapsody. There's a part of the song that I'll play in just a second where they have a far left cello, a mid left cello, a mid right cello, and a far right cello. And they crescendo, and then it stops, and then one by one they go from left to right. And you can hear it perfectly. And although the soundstage is not that far out, the imaging of just there, 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 and there is amazing. And I'll play that right now. Pretty cool, right? Okay, and then real quick, I want to get into the difference between the two pads, because it does come with a pair of velour pads and these leatherette pads. Personally, I prefer the leatherette pads. The inside circumference on the leatherette pads is a tiny bit smaller than that of the velour pads, but the pad overall feels like it touches your head with more surface area. It's a little bit more comfortable, and it does improve the detail in the mid and the bass response. I felt the velour pads reduced the highs a little bit and added a little bit more clarity there and made them a little bit less bright, but I did notice it seemed to reduce the mid-range and the sub-bass range, and if I'm gonna have a headphone like this that displays bass the way this does, I want to take full advantage of it. So I keep the leatherette pads on there, but I definitely recommend playing with them. Although I do consider the leatherette pads to be quite a bit more comfortable than the velour ones, to be honest. There is a little bit of sound like with both pads, although definitely more on the velour, of course. The velour sounds a little bit more open. I prefer an open sound signature, but I actually found that I preferred the leatherette sound of just completely closed with this particular headphone. Now onto the professional use. So they're called the DT1770 Pros. They're marketed to and for professionals. And I'm not talking about the people who are just, you know, making their own videos like I am, or making their own like copyright free music on YouTube. Them and I would definitely benefit from this, but this is going to be a more beneficial investment for people with an actual studio. I don't want to say legitimate because it seems slightly derogatory, and I do not mean it that way, but people who are mixing for more legitimate, larger, and more precise artists, I feel like they're going to benefit the most from this. One of the things that I said in the beginning of the video is that these have like, they're just in your face. It's intense. And that's one of the things that I like for professional use, is that it is intense. It makes you work. You cannot relax with this headphone, even if you lower the volume. I found that late night listening sessions, when normally I would like use lower volume, maybe put it on a 2, relax a little bit, impossible. I had to change headphones because, not that I didn't enjoy the sound, just in the fact that it's just so intense and so in your face all the time, everywhere in the range. It just like, it forces instruments in your ears, and it just pile drives them in there, which is great for detail and for clarity and wanting to hear every last bit. And that's why for professional use, this, and from what I hear, the DT1990s, the open back version of those, are absolutely phenomenal for. Now, another factor is that because of the way that the highs are represented, and even though there is a little bit of loss in volume in the mid-range, the detail is still definitely there. And then there's another boost in the low range, Because of all that, I found that they're a very versatile headphone, especially with the assistance of EQs. There's a couple conflicting ideas, but if you're a professional, you already know what you're looking for. This is just what I would look for if I was going to mix music. I would want something that is going to let me know when something is too bassy or too mid-range focused or too high. And that's exactly what this does. You have too much bass in your track for what you're looking for, this displays it, it doesn't hide it. And if your mix is too bright, this tells you. This shows you. And then if you're not going for that, you can lower it down. And I mean this in the best way possible. They're an exacting and a punishing headphone. And I think they make you work, and for professional use would be a great investment. Now, if you're looking for something that measures more flat, you can actually look at the DT1990. These are the same exact headphone, except this is closed, the 1990 is open. They do measure more flat. If you want more of a traditional reference sound, that might be a better option for you, although it does run a little bit more. Okay, let's get into the cons before I get to my conclusion. So they are warm on your head. For my personal feelings and opinions, your mileage and temperatures may vary. For the consumer, for pleasure, like I said, they're unrelenting. Like, they do not let you relax, and I really mean that. They're just intense, intense, intense. You know, just for sitting at your desk, not really listening critically, that may not be the best thing for you. Maybe you love that. I like it a lot, but maybe you don't. The soundstage, I know that it's closed, but if soundstage is weak, soundstage is weak. It's not a selling point of this headphone. The imaging is very good. The instrumental separation, the vocal separation, although it's not forward, and it doesn't really project, you know, instruments in the background while keeping vocals in the foreground. It doesn't do that very well. But because of how everything can be tracked so well, and the individual bodies and shapes and sounds of instruments and vocals, you're able to track and isolate everything very, very well. And it's very locatable in terms of direction. It just doesn't go that far out. And then another thing I noticed, and this is another thing to note about that SMSL SAP6 that I recommended earlier, on some of the cheaper and lower end amps that I did try, it did make these ever so slightly brighter, something that you should consider if you don't have something with a lot of power. And then another con, which was not a personal issue of mine, but I don't feel like I could bring you a complete review without mentioning it, is that almost all of the low-end reviews on Amazon for this is about build quality. This, to me, and this product particularly, seems extremely well built. I haven't had any issues. But some of the one-star reviews were talking about how the driver gave out after just like a day or two. This headphone did come out a while ago, so they may have corrected the issue, and I haven't reached out to Bayer to really get an answer as to what they think of it. But from my personal experience, no issues whatsoever, but it was a general concern. On to the conclusion. I think if you know what you're looking for and this fits what you're looking for, this is going to be an undeniably good investment for your business if you are a professional. They're an extremely precise headphone in every category, and I mean every category. They're a little bit bright at the top end, the mid-range does drop down a little bit in volume, and the bass is slightly bumped up a lot. And so that creates, in terms of volume, a somewhat V-shaped signature, but the detail is everywhere. Just because it's a little bit lower in volume in the mid-range doesn't mean there's a lack of detail. There's detail everywhere. But if you don't really like as much bass, or you just want to listen for pleasure, and I'm just passing on what I've heard, I have not heard them personally, the DT1990s might be a better option. They measure a little bit flatter and they're going to be open. But if you have a specific need for close, this might be a perfect product for you. So my consumer grade for the money, the detail is unprecedented. It's extremely good from at least the headphones that I have tried. I'm going to rate it a 7 out of 10 for that. And for a professional use, if this is what you're looking for, it's a 9 out of 10 product. It's $550-ish. That's not cheap for me. I'm sure that's not cheap for a lot of you, but it really is worth the money if you are going to monitor and analyze music from a professional standpoint. Overall grade is going to be an 8 out of 10. A couple disclaimers is that Beyerdynamic did send me this product. They're not sending it to me for free. I am not purchasing this. This is not mine. I have to send this back in 2 days, and I'm very sad about it. And they have not tried to influence what I say or compensate me in any way. I am going to leave Amazon affiliate links to this product, the cable, the DT1990s, and some of my other recommended products down below. If you could please use those if you do plan on purchasing it. You can also support me on Patreon if you're feeling like you really, really like the channel. I appreciate every one of my patrons, so thank you again very much. I will see you guys in the next video. Stay safe, don't do anything your mom would approve. I need to make up a new damn intro, man. Bye.